1. This happened around 10 years ago. I was a young teen, about 13 probably. The routine at the time was that I'd get home from school at about 4 p.m, greet my mum in the kitchen, and then go upstairs to sit in my room, doing whatever I did until I wanted food or company. At this time, my older brother, around 20 at the time, and my dad both worked standard 9 to 5 hours and always arrived home at roughly the same time, about an hour or so after me. It would flip-flop between which one arrived home first, due to traffic, etc. But they were usually back as little as 15 minutes apart. My brother would tend to follow the same routine as me, while my dad would stay downstairs. My room and the kitchen are at diagonal opposite ends of the house, so I'm in one corner upstairs and my mum is in the other corner downstairs. From upstairs, the stairs lead to the hall closed off from the downstairs, with the front door, so you can hear anything going on down there. The kitchen is the room next to the hall and right next to the front door. This front door is incredibly heavy and loud. You can't miss it being closed because it shakes the whole house, and I sit with the bedroom door open. So one evening, I'd been home for about an hour, and it's around the time my brother and dad get home. As usual, I hear the door slam closed, but no one comes upstairs, so I don't greet anyone. About 15 minutes later, I wander downstairs, but only my mum is there. It's quite easy to lose someone in the house. They could be in the bathroom, the garden, or whatever. So I ask her who came in, and she says she doesn't know. She thought he went upstairs. We both heard the door at the same time. Like I say, you can't miss the noise. It's not like a normal bit of the house creaking as it settles. It's a heavy slam. And surely it can't have been my brain thinking it heard a familiar noise, because my mum heard it at the same time. Sure enough, my brother and dad come home shortly after, only a few minutes apart. My mum and I are still mildly creeped out about it, but just blame it on the ghost. This ghost is also responsible for clicking the dimmer switch in my parents' bedroom when they go to bed. Naturally, this is more likely to be settling noises, but my mum swears it's the exact sound of when you click it in, without the light turning on. There was a second event too. I don't remember how long after, I don't recall it as often, but I was sat in the lounge. This is the main big room and backs onto the kitchen and hall, so again, you can hear the front door. I can't fully remember if I heard the door or not. I think I did. At the same time, I heard someone walking along the upstairs landing to their room, pretty much directly above my head. The landing has very familiar creaking spots, the type you know the exact location of when you're trying to sneak around. I unmistakably heard the usual creaks. These never occur as settling sounds, only when you step on them. Sure enough, I go upstairs and no one's there. I check every room, all empty. The dogs were with us downstairs and my brother and dad arrive home later. After this, nothing else has ever really happened. A couple times I've thought I've seen someone or a pet and they weren't there, but all mundane optical illusions. I've jokingly spoken to the ghost a couple of times, asking him to not watch when I get changed and such. If he's there, he's not much bother. Apparently he likes to mess about with my mum's light switch. 2. I've mulled around posting this for several days now, and I hope my two experiences make sense. The first happened when I was 18 and working at a credit union in the drive-thru, the ones where we send the tubes out to cars. On slow days, my manager would let us read books and read up on the news when there was no one to help. On this day it was just me and one girl who was in her early 20s. We didn't have a lot in common since she was really into such things as Grey's Anatomy or gushy romance novels. Today she had the latter with her that she had just bought at the store on her lunch break. I don't remember the title of it, but I know it was predominantly pink. As I sat reading the news on my computer, she kept laughing out loud as she read her new book. Finally, she can't keep it to herself, and starts telling me how funny and clever this book is. Now, I've never seen or heard of this book in my life, and as she talks about it, my mind starts to wander, and I wasn't really listening. However, she gets to the point where she says, "Listen to this part," and starts reading directly from it. Then the oddest thing happened. As she's reading the words, I start to hear them in my own head, just a couple seconds ahead of her. After about 15 seconds or so of this without thinking, I cut her off and finished the next several sentences for her. The words came out of my mouth as if I had the whole thing memorized. I don't remember it all, it was 12 years ago. But I know part of it was, and I lost my virginity upstairs while my parents were downstairs watching TV. Weird quote to remember from the experience, but it is what it is. After I did that, we both just stared at each other in stunned silence. She knew I hated those kinds of books and had no reason to know anything from that book whatsoever. Finally she says, "How the hell did you know that?" I just sat there. I didn't know what to say. Scared the shit out of me. She dismissed it eventually, but I've never forgotten the experience. I'm an atheist and I don't believe in the supernatural at all. I don't think I'm psychic. But how would I know what was in that book? Not 2 years later, I had another very different yet eerie experience that I will never forget, and as I revisit it now, it still creeps me out. I was raised Mormon, and yes, I was one of the missionaries that goes door to door selling religion. I happened to be sent to England on my mission, and at the time was in an area called King's Norton, south of Birmingham. We weren't having a lot of luck, and were looking at a map of the area, and saw a small village a bit of a distance outside of the main city. We checked our area book to see if anyone had been taught down there, and saw no record. The next day we took a lengthy bike ride that had a long stretch of just countryside, until we finally started to see it. Now, I had been in the country for over a year and had a pretty good idea of what British architecture looks like. This village looked nothing like it. I remember the buildings looked really modern and spaced out, which, if you know England, that's not usually how things look. There was this wide brown building near the center with a lot of windows. Our front was many small round tables, each with 3 or 4 people sitting at them all drinking tea. As missionaries, we were used to stares, but the way they looked at us was different. It wasn't curiosity or annoyance, as we would usually see, but instead it was just flat, emotional, long stares. It was also dead quiet, as if someone pressed a mute button for the area. Stares in silence creeped the hell out of me. Odd thing was, the other missionary I was with didn't seem to care or seem bothered at all by the very strange place and situation we found ourselves in. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake it. Something was seriously wrong about where we were at. To me, it felt like I had walked onto a movie set. Everything had a slightly unrealistic quality to it, too perfect. The people might as well have been robots. Everyone just stared. We eventually made our way to a small neighborhood which was surprisingly void of people. It was as if the sole residents of the village were at that building in the center. We knocked at a door, and no one answered. Second door. Nothing. At this point, I'm nearly shaking from freaking out so bad. I tell my companion that I think we should leave. I didn't feel like we were in danger, just the strongest feeling of being out of place. He gets annoyed and says we should stay. I keep pressing the issue, and the more I talk about it and point things out, he says I'm just seeing things and need to stop being so dramatic. After about 10 minutes of back and forth, I finally made up that the Holy Ghost was telling me we should leave. He gave up, and we left immediately. He was angry and muttering the whole way out, but once we made it back to the main city, he acted like nothing had happened. I brought it up later that day and only got a, "Yeah, that was weird," from him. We never went back, and he never brought it up again. I've never forgotten. Fast forward 12 years later to today. As I was thinking this over at work and about preparing to post about it here, on a whim, I pull up Google Maps to find the village. I can still see exactly where it should be on the map. I went to that point and there's nothing, just a road. I spent nearly half an hour scouring Google Maps all around the southern Birmingham area trying to find it, but nothing. Where were we? Did we glitch into a future part of England that wasn't meant to be there yet? Where were the people, and why did they look at us so strangely? I hope these all make sense. Sorry, the post is so long. I would be very interested in your thoughts on these. I've never talked with people about them before, but never forgot how they felt. Thanks for listening. 3. This is the first experience I've had that I could confidently regard as a glitch, and not some other explanation. My only regret is that I was alone when it happened, so I have no other pairs of eyes to corroborate with what I saw. I would just like to state that I've never had what one would consider to be an auditory or visual hallucination, let alone both at the same time. I have anxiety, but I'm otherwise grounded. I don't do drugs, and was not drinking at the time. I live in the UK, and this happened a few weeks ago on the 2nd of February 2019. It was just after noon, and I decided to go out to my nearest convenience store to get an early lunch. The quickest way to the store is to walk up a footpath that is adjacent to a primary elementary school. Approximately halfway up the path, the hedges on the left are clear to reveal an opening, an additional entrance into the school that takes you right into the infant school playground. This gap is wide, and as I walked up to it and past it, my head naturally turned and briefly scanned a portion of the playground, the way you sometimes do when you walk past a window. However, just before I reached it, I heard the voices of very young children yelling, laughing, talking, screaming. What you would expect to hear at recess. I looked down at my watch, which says 12:25 p.m, and thought, not such an early lunch after all. Then I passed the gap, and I see children playing. Some have coats on, but most don't, and I can clearly see the burgundy-colored jumpers and pale blue collars of the ones who haven't. I'm also fairly certain they all had on dark trousers or skirts. Of course, there's not much a person can see and remember when walking past 3 yards of opening with no intention of absorbing anything, even if I do dawdle. But a couple of things that stood out to me were a little blonde girl with a bright pink coat was crouched and pretending to be a puppy while another girl was patting her head. A boy with red hair and a school jumper on slipped on the grass and fell to the side. And a large boy with a round face was sitting on top of the slide, holding onto a bar above his head. And the others have evaded my memory, but were running around and playing as children do. A perfectly normal scene. I also registered someone shout the name Isabel, and someone near the birch tree say, "Go, go, go." Why is this important? About 5 minutes later, I'm standing in the queue of the store with a meal deal and a magazine in my hand, and there's a woman with 2 children in front of me. I overhear the girls say, "Off to church tomorrow." At which point it dawns on me that today is Saturday. Well, I knew it was Saturday already, but it never occurred to me when I was walking past the school. Now I realized and was puzzled. I wasn't in any doubt whatsoever about what I saw, just confused as to why there were children in uniform in the school playground on a Saturday. I briskly walked back up the path, and when I approached the gap, I saw that the playground was empty and quiet. I walked the rest of the way up the path and turned onto the road leading past the front of the school. It was dark in every window, and the car park was empty. The main gates leading to the reception were locked and bolted, which only ever happens on a weekend. Basically, it looked how I would expect it to look on a Saturday. I definitely know what I saw. I was a couple of yards away from some of them and remembered specific details. I told my mum when I got home, and she didn't really know what to say other than I should check the school diary online. I did, and there was nothing on the calendar. The following Monday, I contacted a friend whose sons go to that school and asked her if that playground is open to kids on a Saturday, or if the school will run anything on weekends. She said no, and even said she would inform the office to check their CCTV for that Saturday. However, nothing was identified, which was to be expected. I would have liked to have seen it for myself, though. I earnestly think this was a glitch in the Matrix, and I'll tell you what solidifies this theory in my mind. Remember how I described the uniforms that I saw? It turns out, unbeknownst to me, who has only lived 2.5 years in this town, that the uniforms I saw were the older ones which had changed 5 years ago. The collars are now white instead of pale blue, and the trousers and skirts now have to be palish grey to match the now grey stripes on the sleeves. I knew this, as kids are always walking past my house on the way to school. But when I saw those kids in the playground, I saw the burgundy, and it never occurred to me that they were different until it was brought to my attention, courtesy of Google Images. The older and newer uniforms look almost the same, but I definitely saw children playing in the older uniforms. How could I possibly have imagined attire I didn't know existed? This leads me to wonder whether I was actually looking back at a recess from years ago. Do you think glitches can literally enable a person to look through time? Or is it something else? I still wonder what would have happened if I had tried to get into the school while this was all happening. Would it have continued, or would it have disappeared before my eyes? Would I have disappeared with it? It genuinely creeps me out thinking about that. 4. First of all, I have to say that I'm Spanish, so my English may not be that good. Please bear with me. I promise this is good. A bit of context. This is a story from a couple years ago, and I just wanted to share this story with you guys since there seem to be quite a lot of experiences similar to mine. I'm 20 right now. I've always had a pretty selective memory, so to speak. I can remember clearly some events from many years ago, while also forgetting what I did last week. One thing, however, has always stuck with me. I have always and will always remember a bar in my grandfather's village in rural Spain, which we visited in the summer when I was little. Keep in mind that this village is about 500 kilometers from where we live, so it's a pretty long drive there. In this bar, I would beg my dad to give me some change to play the Pang arcade machine they had there, since video games fascinated me and still do. The bar was a building in the middle of a quite long and straight dirt trail, fairly far away from the main village, but where we would always stop after riding my bike along that dirt trail with my brother and dad when we were there. However, we stopped going to this village when my grandparents were unable to travel there on their own, due to their old age. My grandpa is 90 and grandma is 87 right now, and their minds are as fine as someone's their age can be, but they do have trouble moving, walking, reading, that sort of stuff. A couple of years ago, however, we went back to my grandfather's village after almost 7 years without going there, to stay at my grandparents' old house for a couple of days, but without them. As you might understand, I'm feeling a bit nostalgic, so before we went there, I told my dad to help me pack the bikes we had now to use them there, and relive those childhood days. My dad seems pretty happy about this, and says he would like to also relive those memories with us. It was all pretty wholesome. After we arrive there, we unpack all our things. We decide to go for a stroll, and my brother has the idea to have my dad lead the way and guide us, like the old days. My dad agrees and says he still remembers the route we used to take perfectly. Again, all pretty wholesome stuff. However, after riding around the village for a while, my dad and bro decide to go back without ever reaching that dirt trail or the bar. Confused, I decide to ask them why we didn't go there. They both look at me like I'm crazy and ask what I'm talking about, so I explain it to them. My dad answers me, and what he says shocks me completely. He says that he doesn't know what dirt trail I'm talking about, and that in all the years we had gone there, we had always made the route we made that day. My brother agrees, and they both think it must be my memory playing tricks on me. I, however, am shaken. I return home with them trying to forget about it, but to this day, I never have. I know for a fact that this memory is real because we visited this bar several times in different years. I know that those moments there were true. I remember playing that arcade machine with my brother while my dad had some beer on the counter. As I've said, this happened several times over quite a few years, and it's a precious childhood memory for me. I've had some psychological problems before, but all related to my social anxiety, and I've even had to take a few tests to evaluate my mental state. None of them showed any traits of anything that could create delusions, hallucinations, or fake memories. So if any of you guys have any theories on why the hell I remember something that never happened so clearly, I would love to hear them. 5. My head is still spinning and I literally cannot figure this out. My grandparents live in an agricultural area and my grandfather owns an absolutely massive amount of property, something like 300 acres, on which he runs a cattle farm. They live in a house on this property, and they have done for as long as I have been alive. Quite a ways off, but within easy viewing distance of the house, are 2 huge grain silos that are very old and falling apart from disuse. If you don't know what a grain silo is, it's like a massive metal barrel, approximately 5 stories tall, used in the old days for storing grain throughout the winter. I've always been fascinated with the 2 old silos, and I get to see them regularly, as I visit my grandparents often. In fact, I painted a picture of them when I was in high school. Anyway, the last time I visited, I think I encountered a sort of glitch. Looking back on it, I realized the entire day was just off with very unusual weather, but I thought nothing of it at the time. It was overcast but sunny at the same time, and the clouds were hanging low, almost like fog that never reached the ground. The air seemed electrified, but there was no thunder or lightning or rain. We were riding in the car, and we popped up over a hill, so that if I turned my head, I would see the 2 silos. As I said, I love looking at them, so I began to turn my head, when an icy chill ran up my back. My head spun, my heart quickened, and I had to physically steady myself. Some deep primal instinct told me not to look at the silos. Keep in mind, the silos were not even in my field of vision yet, so I don't know why I would have felt like this. Being hard-headed as I am, I had to look at the silos, so I did. There were 3 silos. It seemed like my vision rippled, and I felt sick to my stomach, but I blinked it away and looked again. 3 silos. I immediately asked my mom, who was in the car with me, how many silos my grandfather had, and without looking, she immediately blurted, 3. Then a look of confusion overshadowed her face, as if her mouth had said something that surprised her. 2. 2? No, 3. There are 3, I'm sure. She said, as if she literally had to talk herself into it. An air of confusion hung in the car the rest of the ride to Grandma's house. And when we got there, I asked Grandma the same question, without mentioning that I thought there had been 2 before. She said there were 4. Keep in mind, she looks at these things every day. We discussed it for a while, but none of us seemed content with 2, 3, or 4. So eventually we got in the farm truck and rode out to the silos to have a better look. Sure as the devil, there were 3. I felt sick. My grandmother was shocked. And my mom acted like she knew all along. What was especially strange was that the 3rd one was wedged unnaturally between what I consider to be the original 2. It was even a different color. It almost looked like a bad video game design. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories, episode 98. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, today was new mic day, although I'm not actually using the new microphone yet. It arrived just after I woke up, so what I'll do is I'll record today's video, which I've just done. I'll also record tomorrow's, and then I'll spend the rest of the day just kind of fumfering about, playing with a new microphone, testing it out, and I'll record the weekend videos with it. What I also got today, though, is I figured I may as well order them at the same time. I got a nice little tablet stand, a little clamp to go on the desk, and holy poops, this was one of the best things I've ever bought so far. It's awesome not having to constantly readjust and put down the tablet every time I make a mistake, which, you know, I obviously don't make mistakes, but if I did, that's certainly something that would be a constant and irritating problem. Yes, indeed. Anyway, with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.